Whenever I hear people talk about the Dark Age of Sonic, there are two things that run through my head. One, the time where games were dark in theming, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic 06, the usual. Two, that the historical Dark Ages are more about economic and cultural decline. That has nothing to do with Sonic though, or does it? Over the past 10 years or so, I'd say the lack of story-driven games and lore sounds a lot like a Dark Age for Sonic. We could also look at the classic era too. I mean, the Saturn era was having a lot of struggles selling games, and they're having a hard time figuring out what to make. Today, I will venture into the Dark Ages of Sonic the Hedgehog. That's right, Dark Ages. I think there are 3 Dark Ages in all of Sonic, with a Golden Age to match. The first Dark Era I want to talk about is the classic Dark Age, characterized by the Sega Saturn, lack of quality titles, meaning there weren't really any main entries, Sonic Extreme's cancellation, and the whole isometric perspective they were working with. Some people say Sonic had a rough transition to 3D. Obviously, they've never played a 3D Sonic game. But the isometric perspective kind of was really weird. I feel like you'd either like it or hate it. And based on how the Saturn games sold, maybe it's just because not a lot of people had the console, but I'd say it was kind of a failure. It was kind of the first era that people struggled with, or that people thought Sonic wasn't as good as before. Just the general era of 1995 to 1997, not a very long era. It was still it was more of a hiccup than an entire age, but I think there could be a classic Golden Age and a classic Dark Age, and that general era would be the classic Dark Age. It would cover games all the way from Sonic Labyrinth to Sonic R, and everything in between those, and honestly, some of those games aren't even bad. The games that I'm including, and I'm not going to include every game out there, just for convenience sake and so it's more clear. The games that I would put in there is Sonic Labyrinth, Knuckles Chaotix, Sonic Blast and 3D Blast, Sonic the Fighters, and Sonic R. And for me, I mean, my first experience with this era was Blockbuster, specifically renting the Gems collection, which had non-Saturn Dark Era games as well, but it had Sonic R and Sonic Fighters, and that's all I cared about at the time. My hidden gem for this era would be Sonic R. It's a fantastic game, if not a little lacking in content. Next, we make a jump to 2005 through 2007, which is the typical Dark Age that Sonic fans know and love, the Adventure Dark Age. I'd characterize this by dark tone stories, buggy rushed games, the Rush games, and Sonic 06. I love this era, but it definitely deserves to be called a Dark Age. My first experience with this era was Shadow the Hedgehog on the PS2. My brother and I played the 2-player mode for hours. We beat every mission in the game, except for Central City at the time. Eventually we got that done, like many years later, but as kids we just couldn't beat that stage. Funny to note though, this era is the same amount of time as the classic Dark Era, 1995 to 1997, 2005 to 2007, which, to be fair, I did trim off the boost games because I feel like those deserve their own era. Unleashed is so different from the rest of the Dark Age games. It's not even that dark in tone. And I wasn't really sure whether to put Heroes in Advance 3 into the Dark Age or the Adventure Age. I put it into the Dark Age or the Golden Age. So I put it into the Adventure Golden Age. That's some personal bias there, but it also groups it by year. The games I'm including in the Dark Age tier are Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic Rush, Sonic 06, Sonic Riders, Sonic Rush Adventure, and Secret Rings. My hidden gem for this age is Sonic Riders. It's a fantastic racing game if you haven't played it. It takes a little bit of getting used to. The controls can be a little hard to master at first, but once you master them, this game is fantastic. Now we're jumping to the Boost Dark Age. The age that made me think of this video in the first place, just because It's such a long period of bad stories. To me, it feels like a cultural decline for Sonic. And it would match up perfectly for Frontiers to be the Renaissance, so to say. I'd characterize this Dark Age, the Boost Dark Age, by long periods of only spin-offs, lack of pinball physics or not much creative gameplay, little regard for lore and overuse of nostalgia pandering. So this era I put from 2012 to 2021. It is by far the longest period of questionable titles. My first experience with this era was secondhand, just hearing about Lost World and Boom. I despised Colors as a kid and lumped them all together. So I lumped Colors with Boom and Lost World, not really thinking much of the quality. My first hands-on experience from this era, though, was Forces. Yeah, maybe that's why I'm not the hugest fan of this era. Happily, they did come out with good games during this era. I mean, Mania was fantastic. That's a good hidden gem from this era. But even then, that still fits in because it's about the nostalgia pandering I talked about. And technically this started with Generations, but Generations was a good enough game to escape the Dark Age. I would count the Boost Dark Age as Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2. I could have started this with Sonic 4 Episode 1, but I kind of wanted to put All-Stars Racing Transformed in the Boost Golden Age. And years-wise, it sort of works out. So I put Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2, Sonic Boom, Fire and Ice, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, Sonic Boom, Shattered Crystal, Sonic Lost World, Sonic Forces, Sonic Mania, and Team Sonic Racing, all in the Boost Dark Age. I'm sure I'm showing the tier list in editing, but I mean the most interesting thing about this is, to me, about the Boost Golden and Dark Age, is that they have the most games, because it was a longer period of time for both of them. Well, not even just for the Golden Age, because the Boost Golden Age was like 5 years. That's not that much longer than any of the other Golden Ages. Might even be roughly the same. In fact, it's actually shorter than the Adventure Golden Age, just because there are a lot of spin-offs. And it may seem like I'm trying to bash all sides of the fanbase, saying all the eras of Sonic have bad games in them. But you know what? None of these eras are truly terrible. And if a game looks cool, you shouldn't be put off by the term Dark Age. The reason I included the hidden gems was so I could talk about my favorite parts of these claimed bad eras, or these dark eras. And some of these hidden gems that I included, like Sonic R and Riders, I didn't even know the term Dark Age when I found those. And I was just like, wow, this is a good game. If we didn't divide things by terms, maybe some people would find a lot more joy in these games. Or maybe, using these terms, we can show that regardless of titles, you can find something good. So what's your favorite Dark Age games, going by my weird metric? I think, overall, my favorite Dark Age games, probably Sonic R, Sonic Riders, and Sonic Mania from each one. That's for me personally. I actually like a lot of Dark Age games, honestly. Especially from the Adventure Dark Age. That's just me, though. I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys think of these Dark Ages, and just in general, again, what your favorite ones are. Thank you for watching this video. Like and subscribe for more content similar to this. Hopefully I'll start getting more out there. I've been pretty busy lately, but I do want to try and make more videos. I think sometime soon I'm gonna make a Golden Age version counterpart to this video, so look out for that soon. Thank you for watching and have a great day.